Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 8th, 2011 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. There are agendas for our meeting on both sides of the room, so if you'd like to pick up a copy and follow along, we would invite you to do so. There will be opportunities for public comment at various points throughout tonight's meeting. It is customary for us to begin our meetings with a recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance, so at this point in time, I would ask that you all please stand and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, if I can ask our fine village clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner Schnell? Here. Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you. That brings us to item 3 on our agenda, which involves the approval of minutes from prior council meetings. We have one set tonight, and those are the minutes from November 1st, 2011. Are there any questions or comments or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Minutes are adopted unanimously. Speaking of public comments, we're already at that point, so if you blinked, you'd almost missed it. This is now item 4 on our agenda, which is the point in the evening where we take comments and questions of a general nature. These are comments from members of our audience with respect to matters that will not be on our agenda later tonight for some sort of discussion or action. So if there are any questions or comments of a general nature at this point in time, we would invite you to please come down to the podium, give us your name and your address, and we'd love to hear from you. And I see Mr. Swimmer coming to the podium as we speak.
Thank you, Mayor. George Swimmer, 4905 Main Street, Downers Grove, Illinois. Just a few items to talk about. First of all, the Belmont Underpass opened up. I'd like to thank this council and prior councils for all their efforts to get this thing going. I was involved with it for probably 15 years or so, so I know it was a long struggle, but thank you very much. Also, I'd like to thank the Downers Grove Police Department and the auxiliary police officers for their help with the Lions 5K. I know there were a number of auxiliary police officers there that didn't get paid for that event. And I would also like to thank them for being at the Lions Parade, Lions Halloween Parade, and there were probably 600 kids and parents involved in that, and it was just a great event. So. Thank you, Police Department, and thank you, Village Council. I'd like to just talk about three items that are important to me. The first is train safety in Downers Grove, and the second, train warning device. In Downers Grove, the Burlington Northern Santa Fe trains have had a second train warning device for at least 15 years. That's how long I've been involved in railroad safety, and possibly longer than that. The problem is hardly anybody knows there's a second train warning device in play. The reason being is that chimes go off when the first train approaches the station. When it gets into the station, the chimes go off. When there's another train in the area, chimes go on again. But people don't realize that the additional chimes that are going off is because there's a second train in the area. Saturday, I was at the crossing on Main Street. A Metro train stopped, let off passengers, exited the station. The chimes went off. The people were at the crossing. They decided to cross. They were waiting a long time. I looked down the railroad. There were trains coming not only in one direction, but in both directions. So we've had several fatalities, pedestrian fatalities, where people crossed when the gates were down, and a second train killed them. Along the Union Pacific line, up until just recently, trains were not allowed to enter a station. They had to lay back if there was a commuter train in the station unloading passengers, or if that commuter train was exiting the station. Now, at some of the crossings along the Union Pacific, they have all kind of second train warning devices in play. They have lights that go off. They have a verbal system warning people. They have chimes. Everybody would know that there's a second train in the area on the Union Pacific now and trains are allowed to enter the station. So if you live along the Union Pacific line, you're probably a lot safer than if you live along the Burlington Northern Santa Fe line. Anybody that's been on this council for any period of time knows that I've come before the council numerous times complaining about it. If anybody has any contact with Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, the chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, the controlling interest in the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, please give them a call. Just say, hey, let's get our community as safe as other communities along the Union Pacific line. So that would be item number one. Item number two is the Belmont Underpass finally opened. I had hoped to be the first one underneath it. Unfortunately, I wasn't, but I was about the third or fourth car through there. And I was excited. To me, that was a big event. But we need at Washington, at Main Street, and at Forest, we need grade separation. Many years ago, there was a plan developed to raise the track bed. So the street grade wouldn't change. Cars could pass underneath the track, similar to like Oak Park on around Lake Street on Oak Park, where the track bed is higher than the street and cars pass underneath. It would be a cost-effective way of doing it for a couple reasons. One, you wouldn't have to buy a property, and the cost of the property at the Belmont underpass approximated about half the cost of the total project. So we wouldn't have to buy land because the land's already there. It's dedicated land to the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad already. Most of the structure could be brought in prefabricated. So it would be my guess if somebody wanted to start talking about it now and got serious about it, within maybe 6 years, 6 to 7 years, the project could be started and completed. It wouldn't be a long, drawn-out affair like at Belmont. And I was on the task force for Belmont Underpass, and the people that were involved in that, Brian Krajewski, Patty Bellock, a number of people with the county, they're still available. We've learned. I mean, we know who to talk to. We know who the shakers are, who the makers are. We can get it done. So if this council has, and not only are these crossings dangerous, but there's just so much train traffic now. Now you no longer have to wait for one train at a time. Often you have to wait for 1, 2, or 3 trains at a time. The Good Samaritan Hospital, which is the only level 1 trauma center in the whole area, they're taking patients from the south side of Downers Grove, they're taking them from Darien, they're taking them from Tri-County, they're taking patients from all over, from Argonne. I see my office faces right on Main Street. I see a stream of ambulances on a daily basis. So not only would you reduce the congestion, you would improve the safety. It's something we should start talking about. And I don't want to be the only one coming to the council and say, you know, we've just wasted so much time. We're not even talking about it. Let's do it. Because I get nervous when I speak in public. It's something that's difficult for me to do. So I just, I want to get something going here. The second thing is, probably about 8 months ago, and I'm not sure how long, I commented about the pedestrian crossings in Downers Grove. They're not well lit. The signage is poor. People are always dodging traffic. They may get the green light from a car that stops to go across, and then a car going in the other direction will keep going, and the people will say, oh my God, I almost got hit. Or the car will stop and, quickly, and the cars behind them will hit their brakes. I don't know how many people have been hurt at the crossing. I don't know if anybody's ever been killed at it, but these crossings are an accident waiting to happen. So I've given you 3 what I feel are important things that the council hopefully might consider going down the road. And if they don't, I'll just keep coming back like a bad penny. You can't get rid of me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Swimmer, and yes, it should be recognized that you've been a passionate and vocal advocate for rail safety for 15 years, and there's a lot of people who touched the Belmont Underpass project, and seeing it come to fruition is truly rewarding, and there would be no way for any one individual to take credit for it, because it truly was a large group of people over a long period of time that all pulled on that rope really hard in their own way to get it finally to come to fruition. That said, you're right. You make a good point. While we may feel like it took forever in a world, and it was it took the patience of Job and the strength of Atlas to get this one done, how can we start looking at another one? Sometimes that's the only way they happen is by talking about them sooner than later. So yes, it might be another thing that's a decade from now, but you got to have that vision and think about it. Sure would be nice to have grade separation at all of our crossings. I don't think that's realistic, but sure would be nice to have another one. I think you made a comment along these lines about 6 months ago, and maybe some task force would be appropriate, although we have to figure out how to do it within existing resources. That's the real challenge, because it's not just resources that are available to us externally, it's resources internally as well, but it's an important project and something we should continue to keep our focus on, so thank you for bringing it up again. And thank you for that comment. Yes, ma'am. Still on comments of a general nature.
Yes.
Welcome.
My name is Barbara Messler, 6245 Leonard, Downers Grove. And my request is not nearly as expansive as his. I need to talk to you about sidewalks. I live in the area that you call the Downers Grove, the Triangle area. There's only 4 north-south streets in that area. They only run 3 or 4 blocks long. 3 of them have sidewalks. Our street, Leonard, does not have sidewalks. Normally, I wouldn't care about that. And I'm not even asking this from you, but there are 2 concerns that I have. There's a person that comes down that street in a motorized chair of some sort, and we have a signal light at 63rd Street to go to the shopping center across the road, Dominic's and Target, and the person in the motorized vehicle doesn't really have much of a problem. Navigating traffic is always a problem, but they do pretty well. But we have a man who lives on 63rd Street who is handicapped. He drags one leg, and he uses a walker. And I think he does his therapy by walking. So he walks along 63rd Street to Chase, and then he takes the sidewalk north, and he comes across west toward Leonard, and then he navigates down Leonard, moving his walker in front of him with one foot and then dragging the other foot behind him. It's a really tedious thing that he's doing, and I feel badly for him that this is his only place to do this walking. I think 3 blocks long, we should be able to have a sidewalk. We really should. And it was promised us last year, and then it wasn't funded. And was promised to us this year, and again, it wasn't funded. And I think maybe it's time to fund it and let these 2 folks, and others, of course, but let especially these 2 folks have a sidewalk they can walk on. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We may have some good news for you.
Do you?
It is funded and is
Cool.
planned to be constructed this summer, and there'll be neighborhood meetings shortly, which you will be invited to.
Next summer.
This upcoming summer, the next summer we have in 2020.
Right.
See, that's all it takes. You just have to come to a meeting and ask for it, and you get it.
Oh, we're so simple. Thank you so much.
No, actually, the village has long had a standing policy of trying to get a sidewalk on at least one side of every street in the village, and that's been a long process, talking about Belmont Underpass. That's been a long time in coming, and obviously the funding fluctuates with the environment and the economy and whatnot, but we have a proposal on the table we'll be talking about as part of our budget later tonight that would actually increase the funding, resulting in, among other things, what the village manager just referred to. Well, thanks for coming and for your comment. Any other questions or comments of a general nature, matters not appearing on our agenda tonight? Hearing none, that brings us to our next item, which is 5, public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight, so that brings us to our consent agenda. We have 2 items on our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Mary Tully, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you. I realize I have no problem with voting in favor of this, but in the answers to the questions, we were going to be taking down these lights in the very soon, late fall or winter, but construction isn't going to start on 75th until like the spring, and we're talking about 5 months. We are talking about street lights, and we know what happens when construction starts. They say construction starts, the horses and barricades are up forever, and so anyway, this could be like a half a year, 6 months, 7 months, maybe longer before we really need to take these lights down. So I would just ask for consideration when we take the lighting down.
We'll try to do what we can to minimize the time that the streetlights are not operational.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments from members of the council?
I would just second what Commissioner Waldeck said.
Thank you, Commissioner Durkin. Any questions or comments on any items on the consent agenda from any members of the audience? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin.
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin.
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett. Aye. Commissioner Newstead.
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck.
Aye.
Mayor Tully.
Aye, the consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to item 7 on our agenda, which is our active agenda, and we have 3 items there. The first one is an ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2012 budget in lieu of passage of an appropriation ordinance. Do I have such a motion?
Mayor Tully, I move to adopt an ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2012 budget in lieu of passage of an appropriation ordinance as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, the last few years during the budget meetings and approval process, we've heard things like, I wish we could include X, or we could improve Y, and even things like we could cut Z. This year, with a lot of help from our staff and our residents, we are living within our means and have a balanced budget, with municipal services provided for, infrastructure maintenance, and improvements. I can say this year that the budget process was a lot easier, thanks to good dialogue and a positive flow from our staff, my colleagues up here in the council, and our residents. I will be supporting this budget tonight, and I want to say a special thank you to the village staff for listening to and adapting to all the council comments and questions that we've gone through here in the last, 2 months, it seems like, probably even more than that. So thank you for all the hard work for everybody, and I look forward to voting in favor of this budget.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. I've given a lot of thought to this budget, and we all have, and what it means to our community. Does it reflect what the community wants, what the community needs? Are the priorities straight? Are the priorities fair? Is this budget fair not only to where we are now, but fairly considering the future? And I don't take this decision lightly, and nobody up here, I believe, does. I thought about how I might explain my position, and I thought about explaining a couple trying to do the family budget over the kitchen table, but that is just way too complicated and too long, and I'll skip that. But the headlines on this are going to be that the property tax reduction, that there will be a property tax reduction, and we shouldn't take credit or blame for that because it's a line on the tax bill that we usually complain and point at that we can do nothing about it. Well, this time the news is good, so we should just be grateful that that line item on the pensions is going down. Staff has provided a balanced budget, but just because the number is balanced doesn't necessarily mean it's a good budget. The budget is not necessarily the controlling document because if you read all the materials related to the budget, this budget reflects the long-range financial planning for 2012 to 2014. What you see is a property tax decrease, but in the details is a reflection of spending priorities of the makeup of the council, the need for additional revenue, and a plan to increase debt. While you see a property tax decrease, in just the last few weeks, the water fund portion requires not only the planned 14% increase that we originally allotted, but now it's closer to 25% increase, which I do understand and I do approve that. While the budget can stand on its own, the fact is that many of the spending choices are driven by the long-range planning. The plan includes unprecedented borrowing for infrastructure. Yes, we desperately need infrastructure, but while many government entities are trying to reduce debt, while families are trying to do what they can to reduce debt, the long-range financial plan calls for increased debt. For years, we have not kept up with infrastructure. While showing pictures of how Downers Grove property taxes were low, now we intend to keep taxes and fees artificially low by borrowing money to get it done and paying for it by passing principal and interest payments off into the future. And roughly, if we borrow $25 million as planned, the interest on that bond can come out to around $15 million. And that doesn't fill one pothole, but it still needs to be paid for. People have said we need to stay within our means. To me, that does not mean pulling out the credit card. We are not currently debt-free. We cut many good services for our community on the guise that it was not financially sustainable. Yet we have a budget that will need to increase revenue. We raised property taxes by $500,000 in each of the last 2 years, and nobody was happy about that. Yet the plan is to pay a financial institution an average of $500,000 over a 30-year period, in addition to our present debt and a likelihood of meeting other financial obligations on a debt related to the TIF. As for the priorities in the budget, when we mistakenly thought that we had $937,000 extra, which we don't because that's got to go into the reserve, most of it, we were talking about spending that money, but we still need to look at increasing fees and revenue enhancements to come up with a $3 million shortfall to borrow the money that we're talking about, that $25 million. Most people read the headlines, see the property tax decrease, see a 25% increase in the water bill, and then wonder why they have even less money in the upcoming years. The financial future of our residents may just become more difficult, even without our additional requirements. We have additional revenue options that our residents do not. They can't go to their boss and demand a raise like we can. So I realize this budget is likely to pass, and to be honest, there's really no choice that is really painless. So it's a matter of priorities, what needs to be done, how fast and fair, and what's best, and how to pay for it. And I just happen to disagree, and I will not be supporting this particular budget. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Well, I'll just add that it is difficult to summarize, much less extract from a few minutes of discussion at one of these meetings the process that goes into creating one of these budgets. As the village manager showed on a chart that was put up last week when we held our public hearing on the budget, there have been a series of budget-specific meetings at which great details were gone into. It's not just a sheet that you might find over on the agenda. I mean, it's a full 3-ring binder full of information that's been gone over by the village. And so I would caution anyone from trying to draw conclusions from sound bites and snippets out of a document that has been discussed at great length. And yes, no question about it, involves making a lot of choices, involves making compromises, because as I've often said, this council is a reflection of the community. And I guarantee you that if we were to poll everyone in this room right now about what the priorities were in our budget, we would not reach agreement. This council reflects the diversity within our community in terms of differing views, opinions, values, and priorities. And at the end of the day, you have to come up with a budget, and it's never perfect. It's never going to please everybody. There will always be someone, and probably more than a few people, who will be dissatisfied in some way. I think that's just the nature of the beast. That said, I was at a breakfast meeting this morning where another recent mayor, Mayor Emanuel, was giving a speech to the executive club of Chicago. And he was talking about how great things were going under his administration and how that he had managed through a number of cuts and adjustments and whatnot to cut or to eliminate $400 million of a $600 million deficit. And I'm paraphrasing, so don't quote me on this. And of course, what that left in everyone's mind is, well, what about the other $200 million? So while reducing a deficit from $600 million to down to $200 million may sound like a great accomplishment, we can take pride in the fact that, as Commissioner Waldeck described, we have a balanced budget. Does it do everything for everyone? Absolutely not. Does it do everything I want to do? Nope. I don't think there's any person up here that wouldn't say that if they had a magic wand, they could be king for a day, and there were unlimited resources and no obstacles, that there might be something different they would do. I guarantee you each one, every one of us would be. But it's a good consensus document. It is the product of a long process, and one that began a lot sooner than the timeline that you now see up on the wall. The budget workshop is shown as having begun on October 1st. As was mentioned, that wasn't anywhere near the beginning. The budget is the product of the long-range financial plan, which began even sooner in the process, years ago, and is tweaked and updated over time. And yes, it changes because it's a living, breathing document. It has to be dynamic by its very nature. And again, it's the product of different inputs and different priorities and different opinions by those who contribute to it. And we get to this point every year where, we do have to have a budget for next year, unless we're going to put a donation box out in front of Village Hall and send out the firemen when somebody fills up the box enough to pay for the gas for the vehicle. We have to have a budget. We have to run the village. Yes, there's some debt in this budget, but even that debt was planned long ago. That's nothing new. And it, quite frankly, may not be enough. I heard loud and clear, as I know all my colleagues did during the last election, that the top 3 issues in town were streets, streets, and streets. And so we have been trying to do what we can while still being responsible to our other obligations to put additional resources into improving our streets. And is that the end-all, be-all to our community? Of course it isn't. There are many other things, and I think it's been rightfully pointed out by some of my colleagues that there's more to a community, there's more to a village than streets and concrete and stormwater and fire trucks. You really have to have a community, and that's where you can have a lot of differences of opinion, and I guarantee you there are lots of differences of opinion. But I also want to just once again commend staff for all their hard work in getting it to where we are. The things that have changed are, as was mentioned, number one, we had a bit of a surprise with respect to the water rate increase. I mentioned Mayor Emanuel. They want to replace all the pipes in the City of Chicago distribution system that are over 100 years old, rebuild all the collection systems, and to be a huge infrastructure project, an enormous one. And of course, the people who buy water from the city, such as the DuPage Water Commission, where we buy our water from, end up picking up that cost. So that was a bit of a change in our budget, not one that we have a whole lot of control over unless we want to take the water from Wisconsin. And we did, as was mentioned earlier, through some suggestions of colleagues, provide some additional funding for sidewalks in 2012. So that's a long-standing goal of this council. Again, nothing that this council started, but something that's been a goal for over a decade, over 2 decades.
Yeah.
And continuing to keep our eye on that prize and move that project forward to completion. And there were some things that were not funded in this budget that have been construed by some to demonstrate a lack of support by the council for a particular need or cause or program. And I don't think that's the proper way to frame the debate. I don't think there's a lot of debate that some of those needs or programs are worthy of support or that folks out in the audience or up here don't support them. The debate really hinges upon how to support them and from what source. And I think that's where there's a lot of well-intentioned differences of opinions. And as I think was hinted at prior meetings, there are some good ideas that are bouncing around that haven't quite gestated enough to be worthy of public discussion, but we're thinking about it. So I'll leave it at that. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to the proposed fiscal year 2012 budget? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Okay?
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes 6-1. That brings us to item 7B. Do I have a motion to approve an ordinance to amend provisions for the extension of liquor serving hours?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the council? Again, just for those of you who may be tracking this, there were some, again, I'm paraphrasing, there were some particular nights that a number of establishments in town would be asking for extensions of time for an additional hour of service, such as the night before Thanksgiving and some other St. Patrick's Day nights like that. This allows for an extra hour of service generally with respect to some of those identified evenings, and then reduces the number of extensions that can be requested outside of those dates. So in case you were wondering what we were talking about, that's what it is. Any questions or comments from anyone in the audience with respect to this matter? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes 7-0. Brings us to 7C. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance prohibiting overweight trucks on certain streets?
Mayor Tully.
Stereo.
See if we can do that again. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Mayor Tully, I'd like to make a motion to adopt an ordinance prohibiting overweight trucks on certain streets as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the council? Any questions or comments from any members of the audience?
I do have a comment, Mayor.
Commissioner Durkin,
Yeah,
please.
thank you, Mayor. I had the opportunity this afternoon to speak with Deputy Village Manager Mike Baker and Manager Fieldman about this, and I know that in last meeting I had asked some specific questions about enforcement, fees, so on and so forth, and I know that with the information that's public now in the manager's report, that my concern was I've seen a decline in the fee column regarding enforcement, and I had a major concern about that through the discussions that I had with Dave and Mike. I just highly encourage that we definitely enforce in this area with the new law, once this gets passed tonight, that we definitely make every effort to make the enforcements with this new policy, just like we do on all of our streets. But because of the economy and so on and so forth, I understand why the decline. So with that and the comfort that I've gotten out of that meeting, I will be supporting this 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin.
I would just like to say that I drove that area, and I don't quite understand why they were even going down Janet. I mean, there's no reason except for maybe a shortcut or so. I totally understand the residents' concerns, and I'm glad we're addressing them.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from anyone in the audience with respect to this item? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The matter passes unanimously. That brings us to the end of our active agenda and brings us to item 8, which is our first reading segment of our agenda, which is sort of like our workshop where we will be discussing matters that will be presented for the first time for review tonight and for a vote at a later point in time. So at this point, I will turn over those 2 items to Village Manager Fieldman for presentation.
Thank you. The first item on tonight's first reading agenda is consideration of a motion estimating the 2011 aggregate tax levy for the village. And in keeping with our custom, we will ask our Deputy Village Manager, Mike Baker, to present information on this item.
Thank you, Dave. I have a brief presentation this evening, and we'll start off by putting this process we're entering into now in the context of the overall budget process. So, Mayor Tully, we weren't actually predicting your comments by having the slide ready to go. Had it ready for.
You shouldn't have said that. I was really impressed.
I know. Anyway, as you look at where we are right now, we're just beginning to move into the property tax levy portion of the overall process. And we begin this evening with the estimating the tax levy. So what's being discussed will be acted upon at the meeting next week. There will be a required notice that appears in the Reporter newspaper on the 23rd of the month, and then we'll go into the required public hearing that'll take place on December 6th, and ultimately a scheduled adoption of the tax levy on the 13th of December. I think a few key points that deserve to be highlighted. First of all, the 2012 budget, which we've discussed extensively, reflected a reduction in the village property tax levy by just under $400,000. What the numbers you'll see this evening and everything that's being prepared with the actual levy adoption is consistent with that budget, and so will reflect what was in effect adopted earlier this evening. And the action that's being discussed tonight really sets the maximum amount of that levy, and then that amount ultimately will be reduced through abatements. And the abatements come into play because we have other sources of revenue available to pay the debt service payments that appear on the original tax levy. And I'll show you what I mean with this table right here. So this table shows 2 columns with for the 2011 tax levy that we're going to be considering. The column in the middle, before abatements, shows that maximum levy amount that's being proposed. And you can see it's just under $18 million. I should mention these are the village components of the levy. So even though the council adopts the levy for the library and the special service areas, those don't appear on this table. This really just reflects the portions that make up what we consider the village levy that applies to all property in the incorporated limits of Downers Grove. But anyway, that 17.8 million will be reduced to just under 13 million once the abatements take effect. And that number, that $12.9 million number should look very familiar. That is the number that appears in the budget document. So that's a brief summary of the levy, the process that begins this evening, and I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Questions or comments from members of the council? I'll just add, as I always do, the whole concept of abatements are sometimes difficult to follow because it basically comes down to we have to levy a certain amount as was demonstrated, but then we actually collect less. So the levy is for the 17, but then due to other sources of revenue that are available, we actually only collect, if you will, 12. So there's about a $5 million difference there. But you have to levy it in the first place and then not collect it. It's the way it is. It's almost as bad as that statutorily required explanation that goes in the newspaper, which
only makes it worse.
which immediately lights up the switchboard at Village Hall because they basically tell you what you're supposed to put in it, and it's like incomprehensible to human beings. That's why it's nice to have all Mr. Baker's hard work to put it in layman's terms that can actually be understood. Any questions or comments with respect to the proposed levy from any members of the audience? Well, now that you all understand it, maybe you can explain it to me. Kidding. Don't print that. Thank you.
The next item on tonight's first reading is consideration of a motion which would direct staff to continue exploring the creation of a stormwater utility. The village has been discussing the creation of a stormwater utility on and off for the last decade, but in earnest since August of this year. You may remember that our consultant, MFSG, has made 4 presentations to the Village Council regarding the creation of a stormwater utility. All those presentations, both in print form and the actual video of the presentation, are available on the village website. On October 18th, our consultant recommended that the village continue to explore the creation of a stormwater utility, and in fact, they had some very specific preliminary recommendations that were presented on that night. This motion would direct staff to continue working and continue exploring the possible creation of a stormwater utility. This motion, if approved, would kick off and set into motion an extensive public education and public engagement effort, where the village staff, along with our consultant, would help to educate the public on the pros and cons, benefits and drawbacks of a stormwater utility. And probably more importantly, would allow the staff to hear input and feedback from the major stakeholders, including the public, property owners, residences, and major stakeholders, not-for-profit groups, churches, members of the Chamber of Commerce, businesses, downtown property owners. All the major stakeholders would participate in this extensive process so that we could better understand their concerns, their questions, and their comments to bring back to the Village Council. In this process, we are looking to ultimately come back to the Council in late February or early March with a report on our findings of those public engagement meetings so the Council understands the questions and concerns of the public and the stakeholders. We will forward to the Council all the public comments that we receive. We will also provide more detailed answers to the Council questions that were asked during the last couple of months that have either been answered on a preliminary basis or need more work. And we will actually make a final set of recommendations with a final report. So, and it's important to note that MFSG, our consultant, will be participating in this process. They will be helping us in the engagement, they will be helping us fine-tune our recommendations, and they will be providing the detailed analysis required should we want to go forward with a stormwater utility. So again, it's important to understand that a yes vote next week means that we're continuing to consider it, not that it's implemented, just continuing to consider it. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the Council may have.
Thank you very much. Questions from the council? Commissioner Newstead, I think that's a finger.
It is. It's 2 fingers. Thank you, Mayor.
Couldn't see the other one.
2 fingers.
Manager Fieldman took the words out of my mouth. To be very clear, this is not a final approval of the stormwater utility. It's simply a further investigation of the program. We've already heard from a lot of residents, businesses, community organizations, and many of their questions are the same as the ones that we have already posed to our staff about credits, the amount of the fee, the administration of the utility, can the fee be tax deduction? All these questions are already on the plate and will be answered as we go through the policy question. I will support this item and look forward to finding out more information as the policy question grows, but just be very certain that it is not a final approval until much later in the process, and the public will be invited to learn more with us and give us your input and feedback. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. In our last exciting episode, the last report we had, there were a number of questions that were presented, and I would still be looking forward to some type of a scenario that would have a pay-as-you-go. I know we have reductions in property taxes to switch it over to the fee. We were going to maintain that portion of a previous bond continuing on the property taxes. But I'd still like to see some sort of a scenario that's pay-as-you-go. And that's all I have for, the next. I will be in favor of continuing looking into the utility. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin.
My question was, how are we planning on getting the word out for the public education process?
We're just in the preliminary stages of coming up with that marketing plan and the meeting plan. We'll engage Doug Kozlowski, other members of our communication department. In the next week or so, we should have a better understanding of how we want to get that information out. We do want to use all of the communication tools that are available to us to make sure that we're reaching as many people as possible.
Great.
Commissioner Schnell.
Just a comment, as important as it was for MSG to come up and give us the information as a council so that we were well educated, I think that this, from my perspective, this component is probably more important than educating us. To me, it's the most important component of the whole stormwater utility discussion. And I would highly encourage residents, businesses, everyone out there who may be involved or concerned about this to find out when meetings are. If they can't make meetings, email questions, whatever it is, to staff, but get educated about it so that there aren't a lot of discussions that are hearsay, but are rather based on facts, so that people really understand what this is about and really understand the implications for it. My concern is that, like everything else in life, somebody says something and then somebody says, and all of a sudden that something becomes probably not the full truth. And this is so important that everyone, churches, not-for-profits, schools, you name it, really need to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the reasons behind it. And the more information we can get out there, the better we can do it, and the more feedback we can get, I think the better off we're going to be. So good luck with it. I hope you actually have enough time in the time frame that you set apart to actually do this, because I think it's going to be very, very time-consuming for staff. But good luck.
Thank you. Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The only thing I would just reiterate, and I've been reiterating it every time that I can, and that is make sure that we get some support, either for or against, from our partners, Economic Development Corporation, our Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Management, and it was just brought up the schools. I know we've spoken about all three of our partnerships, but the schools are just as big a partner as the others are. And if we can just get some sort of either support or against, because one of the things that I've been hearing against the utility fee is that if you do it to the schools, all they're going to do is tax me as a resident further because you're putting a fee onto them. And I think if we can just do, like Commissioner Schnell has said and others, the education process, it's imperative that we get that out there. And I know this village and this council has done it in the past with education, and I know we can do it again. I know we keep setting these challenges with education process higher and higher. And like Commissioner Schnell said, there's only so much time in the day and there's more work to be done and so on and so forth. So, I just can't emphasize enough those partnerships getting back to us with some sort of communications. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Mayor.
Just checking, to make sure. I'm in favor of continuing to pursue the examination and the exploration, particularly because of the public education component. And we needed to flesh out some of the details of what it might look like before we could even engage in the public education, because you're never going to be able to educate anybody if they ask you 12 questions and you don't have any answers. And we don't have all the answers yet, but I think we now are in a position where we know a lot more and we can get down into the fine details. It bears repeating that this vote, when it takes place, will not be to implement a stormwater utility, but to continue to explore it, but now at a much finer level of detail in terms of how it would actually operate within Downers Grove and what changes or tweaks or modifications might be made to address a lot of the issues that we have heard about and expect to still hear about from the various stakeholders in the community. But it comes back to this. We have these needs with respect to stormwater infrastructure and other stormwater needs that have to be paid for. So doing nothing is not an option. It then becomes a question of how do we pay for them, and there are different alternatives that one could pursue. One would be to continue doing it the way we're doing it right now, but there are pros and cons, benefits and detriments to that. We could pursue a stormwater utility that was finally tailored to fit the particular makeup and characteristics of Downers Grove. That also has pros and cons, benefits and detriments. Or we could come up with something completely different, to quote an old Monty Python line. But we need to have those options, and we need to be able to explain them in sufficient detail to our residents so that we do get the right feedback, because ultimately this is about choice. We can choose a path here, but we need to be fully educated about what the pros and cons and the relative benefits are of each choice, so that whatever we choose, we'll be able to articulate why we went down one path and not another one. And so really this is the part where we can now intensively start to educate everyone on, well, why would you potentially go down this path? And if we do go down this path, where are we going to end up? We know the one that we're doing right now, it's not enough, and it has some great inequities wrapped up in it. At the end of the day, that might be what we decide to do, or we could try something completely different, although I don't know what the completely different is right now. That would have to be equally fleshed out and demonstrated. So that's really where we're at. So to me, this is an easy thing to go forward with, because now we really are educating the community and getting down to brass tacks about what this would be, so that we can make an informed decision based on all the feedback that we get, as was mentioned, from all the relevant stakeholders who would be affected in the community. Questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to the motion to continue exploring the possible creation of a stormwater utility? Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, neighbors. My name is Tom LeCren, 545 Chicago Avenue. I have a couple of points to make. I've made them before during this process, and I've been here for every meeting with MFSG. And the biggest one for me is sump pump discharge. It's been totally ignored. I assume that's at the direction of someone. But I'd like to know why we're not considering sump pumps discharges, because the village doesn't treat all of its residents the same way with respect to sump pump discharge. If you live, by village code, if you live within 200 feet of a storm drain in the street, you can connect your sump pump directly to the storm sewer. If you don't live within those 200 feet, you cannot and must dump it out onto your yard, either the back or the front. Now, those that do it in the back, some of that water never makes it to the storm sewer. If you do it in the front, yeah, some of it might make it there. But even by ordinance with respect to that, or code with respect to that, you have to keep your sump pump discharge back 5 feet from the property line. So all the residents aren't being treated the same, which is the same problem we have with paying for these things. What we do now is real estate tax, and that's not fair, because the average homeowner is paying more than he contributes to it, with other people contributing more but paying less. So we do need, and I'm in support of continuing this process, because in principle I agree with it. But I would like to know, before they go off and staff goes off and spends all this time creating one, why are they ignoring sump pumps? And the other thing is, the impervious area, you're assuming or presuming, maybe one of the other things, that every bit of rain or water that hits the roof of a house or a garage ends up in the storm sewer, and that's patently false. Can't be that way. For example, I have underground, my downspouts go underground in a 4-inch tube, which is perforated, the water so seeps into the ground, and then comes up in the middle of my yard somewhere, which is basically the same thing as was all this hullabaloo about rain barrels. It's the same thing. You talked about putting 55-gallon drum, take the water off of it, and then water your yard with it. It's the same thing. It's going back and down in the ground, and which some people will say eventually ends up in the storm sewer. I'm not exactly sure how that happens, but so those are the 2 points I'd like to make, and hope that before staff expends any more time, we get an answer somewhere along the lines why some pumps are not being considered, and what is the rationale, the point for being using impervious area. I know it's easy to get. We've got the data. That helps. But with the rationale, are you saying that all the water hits the storm sewers? I'd debate that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. LeCrand. It sounds to me like the sub pump issue is one that exists with or without a stormwater utility. But these are the kind of questions and issues that this process brings out and may or may not warrant some kind of revision depending on where things all end up. And I would say that maybe all the water doesn't end up in the storm drain or sewer per se, but it eventually ends up in a tributary that we're responsible for under federal law. I would imagine some way, somehow, that's where it's going to end up. But thank you for those comments, because that's the kind of feedback and much more that we're expecting to get as we go through this process. Other questions or comments with respect to the proposal to continue exploring a potential stormwater utility? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
And that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor.
Very good. Well, that brings us to the mayor's report, and I have one item, which is our continuing one, which is an update with respect to our efforts to enhance ComEd reliability by working with ComEd. The latest report for this week, and we'll have to figure out how to update these in our off weeks when we get to those. But the report for this week is ComEd has indicated that they have now completed the field review of Downers Grove circuits that were identified for targeted tree trimming, and I assume these are the ones that they previously identified either at the town hall meeting or in the subsequent communications.
Correct.
Using the results of the field review, ComEd is preparing a final plan for tree trimming within Downers Grove. That plan should be completed within the next few weeks and will be submitted to the village for review, so we'll be able to take a crack at it ourselves. And ComEd has informed us that they will be notifying affected residents prior to any tree trimming activities. Do we know how often do they typically notify people in advance?
We do not know. We want to, that's part of the village review of their plan. So not only will our forester review the merits and the technical side of the tree trimming plan, we also want to talk with them about how we communicate to our residents before they do any trimming.
And they're not planning.
I've received a postcard saying they're going to trim my trees already.
And how far in advance from the date of trimming?
Well, it was 2 weeks ago. They haven't trimmed my trees yet. But.
So,
well, that actually leads to my other question. They weren't planning on doing any trimming yet this year.
yeah, they are doing their normally scheduled routine maintenance tree trimming, which happens in very small areas throughout the village on
Right.
Regular
And
intervals.
this is the time of the year that's best to do it.
And they are doing that, and we just noticed today that they're doing some trimming today. And so we're going to try to make sure people understand the difference between the normal maintenance things that would have occurred even if we hadn't started this conversation with ComEd, and then the type of tree trimming that is going to be the enhanced tree trimming at the request of us pursuant to the reliability report. We think they can do a little bit better, as we all could, in communicating out to residents. We've heard that some residents had normal tree trimming, scheduled tree trimming, and weren't aware of it or didn't know when they were going to come. We will work with them to make sure we can have them improve that process.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's all right. You're helping me answer the question. So you got a postcard saying that tree trimming was coming, but no indication as to when?
Nope, and then another neighbor of mine had the same issuance.
Sounds like something to follow up on. Thank you. That's the comment update for this week. Any questions or comments from any members of the council? Any questions or comments from anyone in the audience? Have we been keeping track of residents who've called in indicating that they gave their names and addresses at the town hall meeting and either have or haven't been? Well, I suppose they'd only be telling us that they hadn't been contacted by ComEd.
Yes, we have been tracking that information and following up. We think that everybody who had a comment or a question has been followed up with at least once by ComEd. Some of them are continuing discussions with ComEd. But if there's anybody out there who had an issue or question and felt like ComEd did not respond to them, they can just give us an email, call the Village Hall, and we'll get them to the right person.
Very good, thank you. That's all I had for the mayor's report. That brings us to the manager's report.
No report tonight, Mayor.
Thank you. Brings us to the attorney's report.
No report, Mayor.
Wow, that's swift. That brings us to council member reports and new business. Start with Commissioner Barnett.
I have none, Mayor.
Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, I have two items. With the win over the Brother Rice High School last weekend, the Downers Grove Mustangs football team has earned the right to play Bolingbrook in the quarterfinals of the IHSA 8A playoffs. The game will be played this Saturday, not Friday night, but Saturday night at Bolingbrook High School in Bolingbrook. Tickets, gates open at 5. Tickets are $6 with the game at 6 p.m. So hopefully we can get a good crowd from Downers Grove to cheer on the Mighty Mustangs, and I'm very happy to see that alumni Downers Grove North High School, Jeff Newstead, is wearing South colors. So it just goes to show that he and I trade off purple ties and blue ties and so on and so forth. So we wish them the very best. It will be a huge game. I actually was hoping that they would play Mount Carmel because that's where my father went to high school, and I thought I'd have a chance sometime in my life to actually go down there and see the high school with the Mustangs. But unfortunately, hopefully this is a better sign that they're playing Bolingbrook. Second item I have, Mayor, is tomorrow is going to be the general monthly luncheon for the Downers Grove Chamber of Commerce. Why do I bring that up? Because the guest speaker tomorrow is the Illinois Tollway Executive Director, Christy LaFour. So as many of you know, the Tollway Authority actually put through that $12 billion capital plan with proposed increases in tolls. And I know that this is a joint venture chamber luncheon with Bolingbrook Area Chamber of Commerce along with the Lisle Area Chamber of Commerce. So it'll be a multi-chamber event, and residents are invited to attend. So if you're able to, it's 11:30 is networking with lunch at 12:15 with the presentation at 1:15. And it's right here at the Downers Grove Doubletree. So hopefully we can see some of our residents be there. I know I will be there in attendance, and hopefully some of my colleagues will be as well. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Commissioner. Commissioner Schnell.
Just a quickie, and you mentioned this last week, starting tomorrow, Commissioner Tully, Mayor Tully,
Him too.
and that too. Mayor Tully and I will be attending the National League of Cities Convention, and we hope to come back with lots of information. And we're actually also touring the dental facility at
Yes.
Midwest
We'll be
University.
visiting Midwestern University's Glendale, Arizona campus while we're down there. So we'll be able to see what some of the buildings that will be constructed here in Downers Grove look like in the field.
So we hope to bring back some information that the manager can disseminate to the rest of the council, and we will make a presentation after we come back.
We promise to only bring back good ideas.
Yep.
No snickering in the audience, please. Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. Tomorrow, Wednesday, November 9th at 1 p.m. will be the nationwide test of the emergency alert system. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the Federal Communications Commissions will test the system, which may last up to about 3.5 minutes. It'll actually be this time on radio, satellite TV, pretty much every kind of media outlet there is. The event should be a reminder that everyone should establish a emergency plan and preparedness kit for themselves. More information can be found at the village website at downers.us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin.
I have no report, Mayor.
Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a piece of new old business or old new business. I had asked the village manager to distribute to all the council members the recommendations of the Human Services Commission on the manager's report. He provided a link in a separate email to all of you council members. You should have received that. And consequently, the public won't see it because it wasn't on the manager's report. Maybe we can get that link on the manager's report as well for the public. It was about a year ago that when we had the budget discussions and discussions of Meals on Wheels, that the liaison for the Human Services Commission thought about leveraging village resources such as putting requests for charities, like on the water bill and maybe rotating requests, that type of a thing. Commissioner Beckman and I at that time had some comments on that. Plan was studied for months, and the HSC rejected that notion and prepared a list of recommendations last April, where they sat and continue to sit. And I can't tell you why they never came to council, and we did have numerous meetings with rather light agendas, but I would hate to see a lot of the good work that was done in the interviews with the other organizations that were done by the HSC go to waste. We may even be at a point now where there may be substitutions made to the makeup of the HSC. The original plan was deliberated, it was rejected, and I fear again it may be resurrected, nullifying the good work and the effort already provided by the current members. The basic plan presented to the HSC, as I said, was rejected. It was supported, the recommendations that it came out with could be supported by those, I think, who oppose government dealing with charities and those who want to avoid the opportunity or even the appearance of abuse by mixing the political process with charitable causes. This already has been an issue in previous campaigns, and I hope it's something we can address. So I would like to recommend that we fully review, discuss, and consider the HSC recommendations, and that we hold off making any changes to the makeup of that board should the plan or any part be remanded to the HSC, since they already discussed and interviewed people regarding the process. By replacing those who actively participated in the process, I fear there will be a lack of consistency and knowledge and a loss of institutional knowledge that can't be reconstructed merely by reviewing agenda and minutes. So that's something that I would ask my fellow council members to consider. And please review the HSC recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, on that point, there has been some discussion about trying to achieve some closure for some of those issues, which are some of them hanging out there. There's some board appointments that are still open that need to be finished up, and obviously we'd like to have a fully staffed board and commission before that takes place, and that's kind of a separate process that we engage in, and I would hate to politicize that by tying it to anything that's hanging out there. What I'd like to do is see us get our boards up to full strength. These are all well-meaning citizens, and they're by no means closed sessions, so anyone can attend, past, present, or future members, to engage in the discussion. But I think it's probably a good idea, and I know some of my colleagues agree, if not all, and they're obviously free to speak for themselves, but that we probably should try to achieve some closure for some of those issues, but didn't want to give it the proper treatment that it deserves and not get it bogged down in the budget discussions. So now that we're getting through that part, my suggestion would be that we take that up after the first of the year. We will have been through months of budget discussions, and we can start focusing on some of these issues and bringing closure to them one way or the other in a conversation. Because again, as I touched upon earlier, there are some issues that while there's some disagreement on the how and by whom, there may be some ideas on how to go about achieving some of the same goals, perhaps in a way that can garner more broad-based support and less of the elements that have been either rightfully or wrongfully identified as controversial. So I would be in support of bringing those up after the first of the year when things are a little bit slower, and rather than having it hanging out there, bring it to some closure. I don't see any problem with that, but again, I'll defer to my colleagues whether they think that's a good idea or not. I don't know if we need to answer it right this moment, but I just wanted to add that comment to your suggestions, Commissioner.
Just be clear to hit the recommendations before we, start the process all over again.
Right. And I think they're available publicly. They've been available on the internet for months, so they're there for anyone to read who would like to read them. I've read them. I'm sure other people have read them too. But thank you. And make sure you were finished. Sorry.
That's all I have. Thank you,
sir. Very quickly, just mention that again, November 12th is a really happening Saturday night in Downers Grove. There's at least 3 fantastic organizations that are having events that night, all based in Downers Grove. Dive Heart Foundation is doing its annual luau on November 12th from 6 to 11 p.m. at American Legion Post 80. That's an outstanding organization that obviously is deserving of support in the community. They do some outstanding things. But of course, you can maybe get on a trolley and go from one place to another, because our own Indian Boundary YMCA is also doing their Dance Like a Star annual fundraiser and celebration. It's at the YMCA itself. That is also at 6 o'clock p.m. on November 12th. And that also will be a fun event and for a very good organization that is an integral part of our community. And then last but not least, Good Samaritan Hospital is having its annual Celebrate Festival 2011 on what else? What other night would it be? November 12th of this year from 6 until, I think it goes until 11 o'clock at night. That's being held in another town, which I won't mention. But another great event for a wonderful institution here within our community. And I know that I believe they're celebrating an anniversary as well as part of their black tie affair. So lots of different things to choose from, lots of different organizations and programs to support here in town. So if you can make one, that'd be great. If you can make more than one, all the better. That's all I had, nothing further. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned. Good night.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to tell you. So I